Hey everyone, it's John with National Sports Entertainment, and I wanted to go into today's games, obviously, and I'll be the first one to say, you can let me have it in the comments. I have thick skin, and again, when I'm wrong, I like to admit it. If I had a bad read, I don't like to pretend, oh, well, technically, I thought this could happen too because of this. We're not going to do that. We can find all the ones and the threes and things like that and all the stuff that happened, but for me, the reason our system's been working so good is because we've reassessed and we've understood, okay, we're not going to be right all the time. For the people that did call Philadelphia Kansas City, which a good bit of people have, and, a lot of people had it because I think they believe they were the best teams, and then the others had it because the Reed versus his old team, and there's a lot of connections there. So I'm going to look into that, obviously, the Eagles Chiefs, so we're going to reassess. But I just wanted to say to everyone that did well, a good job. Anyone that rode with me and they went with the Bengals as well as the Niners. Like I said, it's never fun losing a three-legger, especially two in the same day, and those were our only plays. But as you can see, I've updated it. We were at 90 units lost as of our last episode is what I do them as. So we lose 14 units with that. So it's not fun. It's never fun. But you can see we're still up 69 units, even with that giant loss, because that's why we shut them off after. If this is like your first couple times watching my channel, I go into metrics for Vegas as well as I go into why I believe it's scripted and things of that nature, which I'm going to get into that in a second too. So obviously the 2,000 net's lower now, but we're up 69 units, and it's been about 32 days. But my point is we build buffers because the system I set up, essentially, if we lose a three-leg loss like we did, which is we lose, we double up, we lose again, we lose, we double up again, that's 7 units. So we need to win 7 times to negate that. And you can just see right up, this is literally since the beginning when we started, you can just see every W. So we have, bam, there's 7, Nova was 7, and that just negated a 7-leg loss. And then you go down 7 more, and I think the 7th is Mavs cover Rockets, negates another 7-leg loss. And we do this on a daily basis because we play so many college games and we play so many good metrics. I just wanted to go into that for the people that might be a little discouraged. I understand it. I get it. But there's a reason I watch wrestling while these games are on, because with all these plays, I don't have time to watch all these plays. Even the fun games, I like to watch them to see what's going on. And I did watch these two specifically because I wanted to see some stuff. But my point is, at the end of the day, if people, if we stick to this system, which I've been doing, you can see why we can have days like today. Not that they're fun, but we're still up 69 units, which, again, no other channel can claim. And it's all on the live playlist because we build up leads. And then we close sequences out. And after 3, we don't chase. So let's get into today, the meat of the matter. And a couple things. First, I would like to thank God for giving Patrick Mahomes, in his own words, the ability to overcome his ankle injury. God made his ankle better, and that's awesome. I really do. I love it when people have faith, and the fact that God was rooting for the Chiefs really is cool. I didn't know God was a Chiefs fan, but it's good to know. Now let's go into the game and the game before. I noticed a very, very interesting trend that they almost wanted to slam down our throats, and I don't think it's a stretch. So again, I always like to reassess. So I'm going to throw a bone to the people that think it's real. I think we just watched, for the most part, outside of maybe a couple plays, and honestly going back to last week, I think we watched nothing but realistic games. What do I mean by that? Well, I don't think they scripted them out to the extent that they usually do. Now, do I think they threw an audible in the playoffs and changed the teams? No. I know people are making that claim like, oh, they're onto us, so they changed the... I wouldn't be surprised, to something of that extent, but I don't think that happened. What I do think happened is when Pat McAfee came out and said people think it's rigged because of Vegas and because it makes games more entertaining. Right after Trevor Lawrence talked about his comeback and, how it couldn't have been scripted any better. I think they needed to show people a bunch of regular, boring games. And what happened? So we saw earlier today was a perfect example. When a quarterback gets hurt, And again, you have Purdy, who was never a great quarterback, but they had us sold on the fact that he was good. Patrick is actually talented. I can give him that. I've said that a million times. He's the most talented quarterback in the league. There's throws he makes and runs that he can do that no other quarterback can do. So as far as that, people started catching on, I think, when they saw Mr. Irrelevant. And this is why I think the playoffs happened the way they did. This is why I was so strong on Jimmy G coming back. I thought for sure that the Niners were going to win, but it was going to be Jimmy G. But anyway, my point is, we saw a bunch of games now. What happened when Brock got hurt? Did we see Josh Johnson come in and start looking like all these, like Rush did for the Cowboys and like all the Heineke for the Commanders and like all these backups do when they just hop in and look amazing and nothing changes? Or did we see a team that actually looked like they didn't know what to do? So they had to run the ball every play. They couldn't protect their quarterback. There were no realistic plays they could run, and they got destroyed. To me, that is a realistic game almost. Like it just seems like the NFL wants us to believe it's realistic. So what did they do? They did everything humanly possible to do two things, to accomplish two goals. The first goal is, again, have complete blowouts like we had last week, having the Bills get creamed. Everyone was waiting for the Josh Allen comeback, never came because it lined up with the DeMar story. This is all right after Pat puts out his Pat McAfee puts out his, whatever you want to call it. I call it damage control. But now we get to the first game today, and it's a routine game if you think about it. Because when you have a fourth string, fifth string quarterback, that's what will happen all the time. That didn't happen all season, but now it happened. So then we get to this game, and again, this is another. So the first game you can just say, okay, well, they threw a lot of penalties on the Niners. It was pretty lopsided for whatever reason, right? But then when you get a second straight game and they are just completely one-siding the penalties on one team to the point where, for the first time all season, Gene Steratore comes up and says, yeah, these are some bad calls. To the point where they stopped the play and literally admitted to giving Mahomes a second, third down. And multiple things like this have happened. What did they do? Now, everybody watching these games, they're not paying attention to Mahomes' ridiculous run at the end when he couldn't move all game. But at the end, he can just sprint and, pick up an easy 10, 15 yards. And more importantly, they're not paying attention to the obviously rigged and purposeful late hit by, was it Owala? However you say his name, Uwuja. I've never even heard his name said. But, the guy that was fake crying on the bench with the helmet conveniently covering his eyes. He actually pulled the chin strap over his eyes so nobody could see his fake tears. So anyway, my point is that hit was for a reason, but what happened all game? Penalty on the Bengals. Ticky-tack penalty on the Bengals. Bullshit penalty on the Bengals. Another bad penalty on the Bengals. Chiefs do something, no penalty. Late hit, no penalty. So now when we get this, even though, this guy's going to have some accountability, people aren't thinking scripted, like when Bosa purposely slammed his helmet and that gave the Jags the comeback, and Lawrence talked about the script. Now people aren't thinking scripted. People are now thinking the officials completely screwed the Eagles, or the officials completely screwed the Bengals, and before that they screwed the Niners. I guarantee you most complaints online, on Twitter, have now transitioned from the NFL is scripted to these officials are all paid off. They did a great job in doing that. And again, people forget the little plays that happen after these penalties and stuff like that. But yeah, Mahomes, I would like to say I was right about that. To everybody that doubted me, to everybody that doubted my wrestling prowess and my innate ability to call a fugazi injury versus a real one, I am happy to say I was right. And I don't brag often, but people had me almost feeling guilty for saying that he was faking this injury. And people that think it's scripted, I'm talking about. And it's just obvious that he was not. Okay, let me explain an injury to you. And let me explain adrenaline. So Cody Rhodes had his pec torn off his shoulder, and he had adrenaline get him through the match. He was clearly in pain. You could see it on his face. But when he went to use his left pec, or his right pec, I think it was his right pec, shocker, it didn't work. Why didn't it work? Well, there was an injury. Adrenaline doesn't reattach the pec to the shoulder, and adrenaline does not remove a high ankle sprain. So that is the stuff that I feel like Yes, his foot looked like it bended in an awkward way. I just watched a guy slam another guy's head into the steel steps, and it looked like something from American History X. If you didn't see the Kevin Owens versus Roman Reigns match, watch those kicks, watch everything in that match, and tell me that Patrick Mahomes was any more real looking than what happened to these guys. So my point is, we do know that he faked the injury. That's fine. Again, I knew it from the beginning, and you could just see how they do it. He'll run up, he'll plant the foot, perfect throw, and then you'll see him limp after the play. And of course, the very last play, when God gave him the will he needed, he was able to not only get the first down, but get the lucky, whatever you want to call it, I think scripted, but late hit by the player. But it's very interesting because I think the NFL, I am willing to say, I do actually believe we are at a point where the NFL, especially if you watch the Pat McAfee video, making his 180, is at a point where they understand people know it's rigged. So what do we get? We had the two most obvious teams that were favorites from the beginning of the season that are both 1 seeds, who got first round byes, who have the number 1 and number 2 for MVP, that had home field advantage the whole way. They both won and went to the Super Bowl. That sounds like something that should happen. It almost sounds like a realistic moment. And that's what I mean about, I don't know if for sure they flipped the script like these other people that were wrong are claiming, but I do think for sure they toned down the entertainment because let's just say I thought the game was real and paid for tickets. I would be very, very, outside of this game, which they had to end one pretty, close. I would be very underwhelmed with these playoffs compared to recent years. Why? Because in recent years they made everything a nail biter. Do you remember the Bills and Chiefs? How every week it came down to like an overtime game or something? Like, it was ridiculous. The NFC was the same way. Now all of a sudden we're just getting blowouts, the better teams winning, and then when you get evenly matched teams like this, they just seemed that it looked like a realistic game outside of the penalties, and the penalties are something that the refs are going to get blamed for. So I'm really happy to say that I do believe that the NFL is changing things up. Now, I think they're going to go right back to the same script next year. But I think in their mind, this will be good enough to get people off of the fact that it's rigged. Well, if it's rigged, then, why did the 2 best teams win? So that's just what I genuinely believe. I could be wrong. But like I said, I like to go into the games and what I believe happened. And I can say Mahomes was not hurt. His acting he needs some help on his acting because he's doing things like making sharp cuts on reverse counter runs, and then 3 seconds after he hands the ball off, he starts doing the hobble, or he'll make a ridiculous run and then get up and start hobbling, or he'll make a throw off his back foot, the foot that's supposedly injured, and he doesn't show any kind of grimace. So those are the reasons that I know that the injury is fake. And knowing the injury is fake will help us with our Eagles-Chiefs pick. Like I said, just because we were off today doesn't mean we just say, well, that's it. We accept that the fact we've been over the target more than not. And, of course, a bigger game, bigger stage, we want to hit it. But we missed them, and that's all right. Now, we do still have, again, there's always going to be numbers. So we got 1-1. We got the 1 seeds matching up with each other. I'm not going to be looking into Super Bowl 11 and all that stuff because I did it with the World Series, and it didn't work out. It led me to Dodgers versus Yankees. And then when I just do the narratives and what makes sense logically, it seems to vote in our favor. For an example is the Bengals' record against the spread. I almost always take the team that's really, really good against the spread to lose, and their record against the spread was pretty good. But I got a little, like I said, I thought between the symbolism and I really thought people would be on the Chiefs, things like that. I thought Joe would go twice in a row. I thought that'd be different. I thought it'd be the Bengals, Niners. But we'll move on and, like I said, look at the Chiefs and the Eagles. There wasn't a couple NBA games today, but again, I'm sure most people were focused on this, and I didn't have time to really look into them. But I'm curious if you guys noticed anything that I might not have. Like I said, I noticed a couple symbolic things. Like I said, with the Eagles, they showed 5-7. It was number 5 McNabb and number 7 Jaws. They were showing them in the third quarter, this could be the third guy to lead a team to the Super Bowl. Hurts. And then they also went into, in the Bengals game, the guy that said this isn't Burrowhead, this is Arrowhead. I'm almost positive his number was 57. So, when you see those things, I don't think they're coincidences. And again, I'm not going to get too carried away, but that's the numbers being put in our face. Anybody can point that out after the fact, but I tried, to get it before the fact and get a right read. It was interesting. The game started off 3-3-3. That's always interesting. A lot of interesting things. Then you got 3-13. So again, we don't deny the numbers, but I'll be the first to admit I do way better with narratives and with metrics than when I get into the gematria. So, not a good day today. Like I said, -14. But I always look. It's like when you do a long-term view on a stock that you might be holding long-term. And again, this 2035 net I'll change because obviously we're not up 2035 now. We're up 70 units, so it really depends on what your particular unit is. If your unit's $100, then you're up $7,000. It really just depends on what your unit is. So, that's from the beginning since we restarted on 12/27 after being shut down. But yeah, I thought you guys might find it interesting. Just the combined penalties between the Bengals and the Eagles game really has me convinced that they were trying, and they've done this all year, by the way. It wasn't like this is the first time. They'll do it with the coaches, and then it'll be the refs, and then they'll switch it over. And they don't want it to be the players because they're the ones that shouldn't be throwing games, right? Like a ref, they can blame a random ref. They can blame a coach for being stupid. But when it's a player doing something, now it's like, okay, these guys are working together. So that's why I genuinely do believe they made the officials look so incompetent today. It was definitely the most incompetent performance. And again, as you guys know, this isn't an excuse. This is just an observation. If when penalties go in our favor, we win a lot of games because of them. I gladly take it and say it sucks, that for the people that it didn't go for, but it's going to go both ways. But just from an observational standpoint, the one-sided penalties and like just how ticky-tack a lot of them were, the illegal contact ones and things like that, and then the absence of penalties on the other end, and then just at the end of the game, of course, that last penalty, which was a penalty, fans are going to just remember they called 15 penalties on us and none on the other team. No one's going to look at the fact that Mahomes, completely no-sold his ankle injury. Nobody's going to look at the fact that it was a ridiculous play by a guy that better be a rookie, like that's never played even college ball, if this is real, right? That gave the game to Kansas City. I also know they made a point of saying how it was a 57-yard kick, and then it wasn't anymore. So, like, little things like that they like to get out there. But, yeah, like I said, there's not much to go into outside of just recapping what I noticed. And then what I took away is I genuinely believe they said, hey, tone down the entertainment about 50%. We can't have anything crazy. We can't have these 28, games coming back, now we're tied. We can't have every game go into overtime. We can't have every third play be a big play. And we got that. We got a pretty routine game. Outside of the very end of this game, it was a pretty boring game. I mean, they've had some pretty routine plays. So, and then again, the other aspect was make sure the best teams possible win. That, in my opinion, because Kansas City Eagles, I believe they were the literal matchup favorite coming into the year. It might have been Kansas City, San Francisco, or not San Francisco, Los Angeles. San Francisco was fourth in the NFC behind the Bucks, Rams, and I want to say Eagles and maybe Cowboys too. But my point is, the Chiefs were up there with the Bills, obviously for the AFC, and the Eagles were basically always top 3-4 for the NFC, and all year long they were considered the best teams. So I do find all that interesting. How finally we get the teams that really should win, in the Super Bowl, the year that everyone's saying it's rigged and scripted, and every year prior, we have at least one of those teams is usually some kind of outlier. So I find it really interesting. And like I said, I'll be going into our picks tomorrow. You'll be surprised how quick with some college we'll wash this -14. Like I said yesterday, the day before alone, the day before that, we've closed a ton of sequences. And you can watch the playlist if you haven't seen them, because I go into more than just football. I go into literally every play we make every single day, which is usually dozens. But obviously, with these two games, I wanted to hit them exclusively. And again, the Niners game was not much different. I think there is a comeback story in the works still. I think they're going to get theirs. I think Jimmy G is going to get something with even another team. But they obviously went with a different... and I think maybe when Brock came in, they decided, all right, we'll give him a run and go with the Eagles. So again, the people that called the Eagles, good call. The Chiefs, again, it's interesting because we knew Pat was going to be the new Brady. That is one thing that I can say that, to the people that doubted me. While I loved the Niners to win the Super Bowl, I kept saying Purdy is not the next Brady. They don't just do it like, okay, he's a late round pick, we're going to match him up as Brady. That's not what they do. They have people pass the torch. And while Purdy did beat Brady, Brady passed the torch to Pat. He got his Super Bowl win against him. That was Pat paying his dues. And then Brady passed him the torch earlier this year, Monday night. So Pat's going to be the one to win multiple Super Bowls. I didn't think this year was going to be the year. Of course, we can all reassess now, decide if we like the tribal chief Pat or if we like Philly. But my point is, I do think that there's just a very interesting commonality here. And just because Brock is a late pick, a lot of people are like, oh, he's next Brady. But I didn't see that because I don't see the Niners as a dynasty. I thought they were going to be a one-hit team this year, and then the Chiefs were going to begin their dynasty like next year. Get a couple more. They've been to two. They've only won one, so you gotta send them to another like 2 and 4 years, right? If he's going to be the next Brady, so I guess it stands to reason, and this does prove to me that he is the next Brady. It's not it's not Brock. It's not Josh Allen. I think Josh is the next Peyton. He's going to be that guy who wins very infrequently. He'll win well in the regular season. He'll play really well. He'll probably outplay his opponents most games. And then due to some kind of shenanigan or another, maybe a choke, he's probably going to only win one Super Bowl in his career. That's just like the gauge I have on him and on Mahomes. I really think Mahomes fits Brady perfectly. You don't have to look like a guy or play just like him to be the guy chosen next in line. Luka is the next LeBron. Does he look or act anything like LeBron? And they're making the Bird comparisons, but he really is the next LeBron. So I do think we got the next Brady confirmed tonight, and I don't think it was ever really in doubt. I don't know how many people had Brock. I know a lot of people did, and I'm not saying he's going to be terrible, but I just don't see him like running a dynasty with the Niners. I think if anything, again, they're going to give Jimmy G his eventually. He's paid a lot of dues, and he's a more marketable player. But I do think, like I said, we just reassess, we move forward. For the people that won, great job. I won't, belabor anything else. I just wanted to give you my key giveaways of the games. And, I think Purdy was brought to life. I think people, the NFL needed people to see that a third, fourth, and even almost a fifth string quarterback or running back playing quarterback would never, do well against a good defense like the Eagles, even a moderate defense. And they didn't. They shouldn't have, and they didn't. So it just seemed realistic. Bengals was kind of the same. Mahomes didn't go nuts. It was like just enough. He did just enough selling, but I think he did it. As a wrestling fan, he no-sold. If you're a football fan, you might think he sold it well, but he didn't. He did not sell that ankle at all. But they did a good job, I think, of putting out a game where the only thing going to be questioned here is going to be the officiating and maybe a few people mad at 58. And again, they're still going to blame the officials because they made the call, and they were the ones who it's planting seeds all game. They this that all these tick-tack calls, and now the most important call of the game, and they have no choice but to call it. So I think it's going to be injuries is going to be a talking point going into the offseason, obviously, but the officiating is going to be. They went about 2-3 years without the officials screwing up. They had the replacement refs. Then obviously they had a bunch of bad calls after them even, and the phantom pass interferences, and the NFL switched it up, and they're like, all right, now we'll just have the players kind of screw up assignments. Well, obviously the players weren't ready for it because very quickly you can see how they have, again, when McAfee, the biggest guy that for the NFL, like the biggest draw, is out there telling people, as far as his channel and his brand, telling people weeks removed from saying it was rigged. Oh, it's not rigged for entertainment. It can't be. Everyone would have to know about it. And they kind of place it on they even put it on the officials in his video. They're like, well, I could see. They actually specifically said if a team's up by a certain amount of points, I could see the officials not caring as much and maybe just calling more penalties or calling less penalties. That was what I believe it was Watt's response, or who was the guy? AJ Hawk. I always get those guys mixed up. I think it was AJ Hawk or TJ Hawk. Whoever's on the show with Pat, he was basically saying how officials will not care as much if it's a blowout. So maybe that they were trying to explain why so many penalties were called on the Niners. But then there was a bunch called this game. So I think we're going to hear nothing but Pat McAfee talk about how horrible the officiating was. And that's real. I could be wrong, but I think he's just going to really hammer that home because they made a point of having the officials look just god-awful. And then they'll talk about how, the Niners really didn't have a chance because of the quarterbacks. But let's see what the officiating talk is going forward and see if we're ahead of that narrative, because I think we are. I think they're switching right to them, and that will explain whatever happens in the Super Bowl. And then they can't say, it was rigged one way or another. So again, let me have it in the comments. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm the first to admit it. I think over the season we've been very over the target. So just because we don't get the last game doesn't, or the game before the last game, I don't negate all of our good calls, and we've profited, so we've done good. And we're going to, segue right into the next NBA season. But we got a Super Bowl to look at and see what's going to happen with that. I'll have all those picks out, all like the props and what I believe is going to happen. The good thing is, it's very rare I have a couple bad weeks in a row with football, so I'm expecting a bounce back and us to win the Super Bowl. Honestly, right now I'm very tossed, so I'll have to look into it and just see, based off of, again, the fact that I do think that they're not going to go crazy with the entertainment, and they can't have a hobbled guy or a guy with an arm that's hurt looking ridiculous. Accounting for all that, I'm going to listen to Pat McAfee and then see, I think we'll be over the target. So take care, everybody, and happy earnings.